Good morning, and thank you once again to everyone who's taken up the time to join us on this very important session. My name is Salieu Mansaray, and as you've been informed, I've been involved in all things internet for well over 15 years. I'll say close to 20 years. And looking at what we have to discuss here today in terms of the digital economy, as was stated in the introduction by Folake, I strongly believe that the internet will be the change enabler for Africa in terms of governance, in terms of economical growth, etc. So we have with us here a group of panelists who will be able to articulate some of these aspirations that we have in West Africa and how we can harness the potentials of the internet for greater growth in Africa. I believe the first will give the chance to do so will be my good friend, Mr. Poncelet. If you're ready, Mr. Poncelet, I will hand over to you for you to give us the opening brief. Over to you, Poncelet, if you're ready to go. Do we have Poncelet on the floor?
Thank you very much, Salieu. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can, and we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a very good topic. Yes, it's a very good topic to start. Internet governance has been developing and has also been taking cue from what is happening with emerging technologies. And it is not surprising today we are talking about the digital economy as it relates to it. And it's also very much
we're having a break.
For one reason I just went off, you know. So I think I will start by saying we have to look at best what a very robust digital economy will do, not only in West Africa, which is about 1/3 of the African population, but across Africa, where our population growing rapidly. And this is very important in the sense that when we look at what has happened since last year in March 2020, when the COVID started, we discovered that a lot of things went digital. Our government started thinking differently. Things we didn't even expect African governments to do in terms of even ministers sending emails, or it was maybe secretaries or personal assistants. We all saw this happening because we discovered, whether it at the most bottom level, that people have to communicate. And the only way we communicate better without face-to-face interaction, as we are doing now in this forum, which we have learned from a lot last year when we had our internet governance virtually last year, is by using internet-based technologies to be able to communicate. And the way the digital economy too is evolving. A lot of payment systems have come into play. And one important trend that has happened is that a lot of countries have started seeing the importance of digital cooperation. So within the bigger picture, to look at what actually is digital cooperation, how around making all the players to each other and making those who are digitally excluded to be included in the conversation. I think with that said, I will stop there for now and then I'll talk of solutions later.
Okay, thank you very much, Poncelet. Thanks very much. Yes, I think the whole idea of inclusion is very important, and more so when we look at adoption of most of the fintechs in West Africa. There's been a lot of growth in that area. So I believe that inclusion will be key. So we hope to hear a bit more from you as we proceed. I'll now ask for Madam Fatou to please take the, well, not so much the floor, but take the entire universe and give us her presentation. Over to you, Madam Fatou. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me the floor. Can you hear me very well? Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you, WIGF, for having given us the trust to go ahead with our presentation on digital economy. As was well said by Poncelet and other presenters in the last 2 days, the digital economy is truly important to Africa, and in particular, our West African countries. I will focus on the case study, Senegal case study, and I'll also give examples of other African countries who will think about using digital economy in order to improve the lives of its populations. Kindly allow me to share my screen with you.
Est-ce que parvient à voir mon écran?
Can you all see my screen?
Je vais juste, OK. Là, une petite introduction sur le Sénégal.
So briefly, this is Senegal. I think you all know Senegal, but it would be good to just give you a couple of figures or information. So we'll focus on 3 aspects, a couple of figures on Senegal, brief information on the strategy for Senegal for 2025. Senegal has put in place a strategy that we call the Strategy 2025 for Senegal. Here are a couple of figures that's really important for Senegal. So it's a small country of more than 196,000 kilometers squared, population that is young, of more than 17 million inhabitants, with a density of 87.5 inhabitants per square kilometer. There's a growth, demographic growth is 3.6% per year. When it comes to telecom, you notice that there's a contribution towards of the industry of 3.70 to the GDP. That is the 4th ranking in Africa. The rate of mobile penetration is 114.21%, as well as the linear accumulation of optic fiber is 13,500 kilometers, of which 5,000 comes from Senegal state. So we do have a broadband internet of 360 GPS, which is important for the digital economy. Regarding digitalization, Senegal has put in place a strategy, which is the SN 2025, as well as a national strategy for cybersecurity, which is SNC 2022. Senegal is also part of the first countries to put in place a National Council for Digital Internet. And we have a website, which is www.numeric.gouv.sn. We've put in place so our National Council, our Digital National Council is put in place because the private sector, civil society organizations, and the public sector are involved within our National Council. We also have to put in place a good legal framework, which has been done which has been done recently. My presentation, which I have already shared with the organizers here, but I will also share with you a copy of my presentation so they can have more information. You also see the, we voted the Startup Act law in 2020. We have an exchange point, CENIX, as well as implementation of a national fiber optic in Senegal. We also have put in place a virtual university for Senegal, UVS. It is the first digital university in West Africa and Center and East Africa. We put in place many platforms, e-commerce platforms such as eComcom, Femezon, eSold, eTax, and Teledac. Teledac enables us to show the dematerialization of our procedures. In the last month, we inaugurated the data center, and we've also implemented a space for services that host career, unemployment, and employment centers. So since we're having employment issues for our youth, we've created a space called Espace Senegal Services, so as to help the youth to share with us their worries and to help them exchange with us and find jobs for the youth. Now, moving on to the next slide, you notice that the organization has now been institutionalized at the forum. We received an award from the head of state for digital innovation. In Senegal, when it comes to inclusion, that is digital inclusion, there's the importance of supporting the youth and women. So we put in place a big project which supports women and enables them to be more independent. And we've also created another project for handicapped. So we have two projects for inclusivity, that is digital entrepreneurship for the women, and also projects to help handicapped citizens. Now, here is a brief of our strategy, SN 2025, to better, we've shown the importance, how our strategy will support our citizens. So it has a strategy with a futuristic vision. We involve the dynamic private sector, and I believe that the vision has already grouped everything that all our expectations of digital economy. So we will use. So there are 4 aspects here. Our strategic objective, that is open access to affordable digital networks. The second one is digital administration that will give services to citizens and companies, promotion of digital industry, which is innovative and creative, that will create value. And the fourth is the dissemination of digital access to economic sector. So to better support these populations, we need to make sure that they are trained in terms of emerging technologies, trained in terms of everything that touches digital networks and innovation. And all this rests upon the prerequisite, which is the legal framework and institutional legal framework. And we are working on that. And the second prerequisite, which is human capital. And secondly, that is a national strategy for cybersecurity. So these prerequisites have really been implemented at 80%, we would say. So, as I said before, the strategic objective is on 4 aspects. Again, aspect 1, open access to affordable networks and digital services. I hope that for the interpreter, I'm not talking too quickly because I hope if I'm talking too fast, then I could slow down a little bit if you wish. But I don't want the chair to tell me that I have already used up my time. That's why I'm going quite quickly. Thank you. So the second strategic objective is having a very connected administration. When we talk about, because the connection's already been made, so now we're talking about the administration of the digital network and digital services for citizens and companies. We're going back to strategic objective number 3. We're working on the promotion of a digital industry that will enable us to promote employment and, of course, create value and research. And in the fourth objective is the dissemination of digital networks, which will push our vision, that is access to digital services for all. Now, if you look at the strategy and the prerequisites, there are about 3 or so prerequisites. The objectives, there are 4 of which, so you can see the different priority projects under objective 1. You see that with our strategy, we're working towards capacity building of access to network and the usage of artificial intelligence. Under Act 2, we are focusing on the strategy ECOV. We've already started with the state. We've already started with the demilitarization of certain of our services, but since we're working towards industrialization of our process, we need to accelerate more or less this activity. Regarding Objective 3, we will strengthen with the implementation of the digital technology space in Ndeye. We will work towards developing our services offshore and, of course, contribute towards digital entrepreneurship, generally speaking, or particularly amongst females, amongst women. Thank you. And that is the Diamniadio, Sebikotane, and Diaslak Rose. These are the digital cities or towns that we're implementing. In Objective 4, we're working towards developing a convention towards the implementation of a digital center. We're working with the ministry in charge of territories, e-territories. Of course, we're going to work with the fishing industry and agriculture industry. So, going on to the next slide, when we're talking about the cost of our strategy, we expected to spend more money, but since we've already started the implementation, we've noticed that we only need 1,700. We only need 1 billion CFA, 36% will be private, 36% and 28% will be public. Now, regarding the implementation of the strategy, which is SN 2025, Senegal has already started a couple of projects that I have already mentioned, but we'd like to mention the lack of political will. But right now in Senegal, there seems to be a more positive will from our politicians. So we have executed 5 projects, priority projects in SN 2025. We accelerated it, we will support, we will reinforce projects that already exist, and we will also reinforce infrastructure, that is digital infrastructure and access to high debit internet in rural zones and coastal zones. Will increase the development of the usage of the internet by creating platforms for our e-citizens. We'll use the application of digital access for economic priority sectors. And we will work, of course, on the protection of citizens when it comes to cybersecurity. We need to finalize the legal framework. We hope to do so by the end of December 2021. We're able to so what we have left now in the implementation of SN 2025, that is the execution of 5 projects, and they will go in conformity with our PSE, which is our reference framework, and this our priority program in line with. So since COVID-19, Senegal has had to adapt its policies, and the 5 priority projects are the following. The first one is to do, again, as I said before, training and building capacity of entrepreneurs in emerging technologies. Secondly, the strengthening of digital infrastructures, and accelerate the implementation for the strategy by making sure that there's also the protection of children online, and of course, building and strengthening our legal framework. The other important aspect is the digital industry that needs to be developed so that we'll be able to meet the employment needs of the youth. Now, looking at the projects, we have the digitalization of administration. We are working towards a big project, as you may know. We're working on our motto is digital access for us, for everybody, and for all usages. We're working towards reducing movement, and we need a very good address so that we can take in orders for transport. E-commerce is important. We've also suggested possibilities of buying and selling online. As you may know, in Senegal, digital payment transfers are now the norm. So Senegal is now used to using we're also working on another project, which is handicapped or ICT for the handicapped citizens, as well as encouraging digital entrepreneurial women. We have 2 projects that are ongoing since 2020, and we're working towards better planning centers and training centers for both the youth, women, and handicapped. So I'd like to better explain the 5 priority projects. So the first aspect is to reinforce the infrastructure and to facilitate access to populations, to implementation of the plan, access to high debit, implementation of a strategy that is upgraded to provide universal services, develop and easy access by rural populations to ICT. Secondly, we have the development of innovative digital services in the cyberspace that is safe and secure. There's also the implementation of implementation of
l'industrie numérique avec la mise en place
numeric industry, as well as partnerships, public and private, towards implementation. What is really encouraging is that in order to better understand what is behind the smartphones and to strengthen trust in uses of technology, we have put in place a factory that assembles digital equipment, and in doing so, we have created employment for the youth. In conclusion, the usage of digital economy is important for relaunching our economy, and we want to accelerate that. I want to accelerate and better and insist on participation of civil society organizations so as to ensure that we have a government that is working towards servicing its populations, its industries, its companies, so as to create better trust between all the parties and, of course, accelerate the performance of our states and finally go towards, because the implementation of a digital park will enable our country to welcome international companies, and in doing so, create employment and, of course, keep our young from emigrating. And those who have emigrated, draw them back into our country so that they will be able to better develop our country and, of course, Africa. And in doing that, e-education is important, e-commerce is important. We've also talked about digital health. So with COVID-19, we noticed that it will be better for Africa to develop e-medicine, that is access to medical care online or distance. Mr. Chair, dear participants, I'd like to say that with the partnership between and the development of services and numeric services for all usages when it comes to trade, agriculture, education, health, we will end up having emerging digital countries. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Je vous remets la parole.
And give me back the floor. Thank you.
I am not sure how we should do it, but I think that deserves a standing ovation. But I think just a bit of a tap from everyone will be enough for now. Madam Fatou, you've done a fantastic presentation there, fantastic. And I hope that we can capture this, and if possible, we'll have to ask for someone to do an interpretation of this slide for us in English, because looking at what you've just spoken about in the last 30 minutes, I believe that it's a very good framework for other West African and even African countries to copy from, because you seem to have laid the foundation in Senegal for a digital economy, not just for the next 5 years, but certainly, I believe, for the next 20 or, beyond 2025. This is going well beyond that. So we thank you very much. Just on some of the issues that perhaps might have been lost in translation, but the translator has done a very good job. You spoke about ensuring that we have the legal framework to enable the digital economy to grow in West Africa. That is very, very important, because without that, definitely there will be a lot of institutions that will hesitate on venturing onto online onto e-commerce. So that was very good. You also spoke about encouraging startups. That is an idea that should be universal. Startups we, on so many areas in West Africa, we're way behind, but the fact that in Senegal, you have put together a program to encourage startups to have more data centers, that also is very important. I think we will also take that up, and I'm sure participants here will look favorably at the SN 2025, which I'm sure will be, is it on your website, this SN 2025? Is it available on the website? On your country website, Madam Fatou? Madam Fatou, are you there? Okay, I mean, we can find out, but it
Oui,
seems...
c'est disponible au niveau du site web.
Yes, it is available in the website of our department.
Okay, excellent.
1.2.sm.
Excellent, excellent. Okay.
We are going to translate the presentation and then make this available to you.
Fantastic, fantastic. So we will be taking questions at a later point, but we'll now, perhaps for now, ask Madam Martha to take the universe and give us our own presentation. I think we will allow, I think if 15 minutes, will 15 minutes be enough for you, Madam Martha?
I wouldn't even use up to that. It's
okay. Excellent, excellent. We want participation from everyone. That we've got well close to 100 people online, so you have the ears of 100. So over to you, Madam Martha. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed a great honor to speak at the 13th edition of the West African Internet Governance Forum. Permit me to stand on all existing protocols. And I am delighted to share my thoughts and experiences under the overarching theme, digital inclusion and access for resilient West Africa. Now, we know that the digital economy is the driver for innovation and economic growth, and it is driven by broadband internet, as well as relevant ICTs. Now, although we can clearly see that there exists a huge gap between the global North and Africa in terms of broadband access and adoption, the digital economy is still progressive in West Africa, with different countries growing at different paces and varying degrees. So Nigeria, for example, had 104.4 million internet users in January 2021. That is about 50% of the entire population, with a growth projection of 131.7 million users by 2023. In January 2021 also, Ghana had about 50% internet penetration, just like Nigeria. So we can clearly see that West African governments are making crucial efforts in putting infrastructures in place to penetrate very remote areas, define all the risks, which of course is highly commendable. So it is therefore urgent that deliberate interventions in the internet governance of West Africa be put in place for resilience. And here are a few of my recommendations. Number one, reduce the cost of access by driving internet policies that would encourage more digital literacy and digital skills at the grassroots. Not just having programs in the town as usual, having it in the cities where people are already have already keyed into the digital economy, but driving it to the grassroots, ensuring that more participation of vulnerable groups are well represented in the entire scheme to spur demand and adoption, hence expanding the overall access base, because cost is inversely proportional to access. So the more expensive the internet is, or the broadband is, the less people that would have access, and vice versa. Then the second recommendation I have is that the Internet Governance Forum needs to ensure more in-depth participation in West African coalition of regulatory bodies. For example, we just heard the previous speaker talking about the wonderful things they are doing in Senegal. It will be it will be easier to replicate what they've done in other countries. But I also want to give an example of the Nigerian Communications Commission in the regulatory body for Nigeria. Just yesterday, we held an industry consumer advisory forum where the NCC synthesized stakeholders and the public on deployment of new technologies for improved consumer experience and debunking 5G misconceptions and conspiracy theories. Now, because of the NCC's model for consumer awareness and support, more users are encouraged to key into the digital economy because they know that their interests are protected by this regulatory body, and it is really encouraging with very, very wonderful success stories. The third suggestion I would like to put forward is that there's something that I coined up, earned access strategies for internet access. So I want to encourage the internet governance to implement that strategy. It creates a ripple effect, and it can be achieved by encouraging local content in local languages using the available resources. I'm talking about people in remote areas where they lack basic broadband infrastructures. Those people are the most marginalized, and special efforts like this have to be, special strategies like this have to be put in place to ensure inclusion. And if we use already the resources they have, it will be easier to pass on whatever information, digital literacy skills, even via radio, to spur innovation and interest in the digital economy. Once a few people begin to adopt it, they will share their knowledge and bring other users as well. It will create a ripple effect, and before you know it, the more users will get, we begin to key into the digital economy. And once the adoption is high in even a marginalized community, it will encourage the MNOs and it will attract more infrastructure that will, boost digital economy in that area. So the fourth recommendation I have is that strengthen rural economies to encourage urban-rural partnerships and migration, and also create more opportunities for marginalized communities to receive maybe small grants for running projects and businesses in the digital economy. This will increase traffic and users, as well as reduce the cost of deployment of more infrastructures to those remote communities in the long run. Then the fifth recommendation I have is that we need to strengthen policies. The Internet Governance Forum, the West African Internet Governance Forum, needs to strengthen policies and efforts at both the local and global level to combat privacy and cybersecurity challenges, especially as West African countries are adopting and implementing 5G. The implication of these threats in the IoT era is huge. And if those strategies are not in place to combat these threats, it will further widen the gap and even push out the people who are trying to key into the digital economy. And then the sixth recommendation I am proposing is that policies need to be driven to mandate West African governments to drive mass literacy on basic privacy and cybersecurity skills for all groups and individuals, because the threats that are going to be born and the threats that will increase as more people adopt, it's not, it doesn't discriminate whether you are vulnerable, whether you are and even the marginalized groups, the vulnerable groups, the excluded groups are more likely to fall victims to these threats. So it is very important that no matter the level or class of users, everyone has to be a soldier. Let me use that word, a soldier to combat the privacy and cybersecurity threats in the digital economy. Then on infrastructure, we cannot ignore the importance of reducing the cost of right-of-way. In Nigeria, the Honorable Minister has made, progress and has really put policies in place that will reduce the right-of-way costs for marginalized communities. And that is why we are recording more and more people keying into the digital economy. So lastly, I would like to chip this in that without good access and without digital inclusion in the digital economy, it will be very difficult for any country in Africa and even globally to achieve the sustainable development goals. So thank you for having me. Thanks to Mrs. Mary Ruduma for coordinating. I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Martha. That was an excellent presentation. So panelists and participants, I welcome you to another edition of the Jollof Rice War. So now it's not just Ghana, now we've got another war, which is a presentation war between Nigeria and Senegal. Well done, Madam Martha. We'll decide who the winner is, but I think we've got a winner for West Africa here. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
I think from what you have lamented there, it's very, very important that some of these recommendations that you've made are taken on board, and I'm hoping that our repertoire will be taking these 6 that you've highlighted. And I think it's very important that the issue of costs, because if we're going to ensure that there's digital inclusion and for the growth of the digital economy in West Africa, certainly we need to ensure that everyone comes on board. And so if we're now looking at 50% penetration in countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, and I think a few others, that is welcoming news. And in terms of the collaboration, yes, I do agree with you. That's another area that we need to work on, so that such ideas that we're bringing on board on such forums, so that all 100 or plus of us who are hearing these suggestions will take them on board. I do particularly like the one about the herd incentive, where we could have that ripple effect. Yes, that's very important, because I think there's also that term being used in terms of fighting the COVID-19, where to have herd immunity. So I think for now, you have coined that quite well in terms of having that herd ripple effect, which I believe will help us as well. On the issue of strengthening policies, you mentioned IGF. Are you referring to IGF driving the policy, or are you talking about government driving that policy, Madam Martha? Your 5th recommendation.
About driving policies to mandate West African governments to drive mass literacy.
Okay, right.
No,
okay, so
are you referring to that question?
I'm referring to your fifth suggestion, strengthening of policies.
Oh, yes. So all the recommendations, I'm directing them to the West African Internet Governance Forum,
right.
the IGF, the WAIGF, to be involved, be involved in strengthening these policies. So just like, yes.
Yes, okay, that's, I think that's something that I think we're all taking on board. And when you talk about IGF, you talk about multi-stakeholders. So we're expecting everyone to be here. And which is one thing we've always pointed out, that we don't always just want the minister or the president or vice president to come and open up an IGF and then they go away. and then we send a communique. They said, oh, okay, they've done well, and put it to the side. So I think that we should continue on that. The issue of also, you highlighted the issue of cybersecurity literacy. That is also very important, because there are people who are apprehensive about utilizing the internet because they're afraid. So certainly, I think it's a good point. What we will now do is, perhaps, I don't know whether, Poncelet, you have other views you might want to come in with at this point. Are you there, Poncelet?
Hello, we have Eric. We have Eric on the call. Eric is on the call.
Okay. Eric,
Yes.
On the call. Okay, excellent. Okay, Poncelet, if you can just give us a few minutes while we hear from Eric. Thank you very much. Over to you, Eric.
Unmute yourself, Eric. Unmute yourself, please.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak at this forum. I would load my presentation.
I don't know whether it's me, but I don't seem to be getting anything back from Eric. Are we all online?
Oui, on vous entend.
I think he has some challenges.
We can hear you.
He comes back.
Yes, we're okay. So while we're waiting on Eric to rejoin us, yes, I did throw this question back to you, Poncelet, taking into account what has been presented both from Senegal and Nigeria. You've been in this ecosystem for quite a while. How do you see governments being able to work with us, or how can we, as participants in such forums, work with government to push forward some of these policies? Over to you, Poncelet.
Yes. Thank you very much, Salieu. I think brilliant presentation from Fatou and Mata. I think the key in moving forward is getting our people to be more included in the discourse, by bridging that digital divide. So we still have a lot of people digitally excluded. But what we have noticed since these COVID times is that our governments have done more with people to be more included in various things. By, if you look at is it palliatives? They use the word palliatives during this COVID for government to disperse funds to vulnerable people. Most of this have been done through mobile money. In West Africa, we have a model of M-Pesa to the next level. So you have people, you have seen that in most cases, in this, especially in these times where we usually blame our governments that monies are disappearing, that actually a lot of monies have actually gone to poor people who really needed our government have provided, and have done it through mobile money. You know, for example, in Gambia, it was done successfully, you know, and several other countries have. But the main thing, the main gist in your discourse boils down to bring the cost of internet down. Because if you look at it, we are in a situation whereby if someone, I'll give you a very typical example in my Gambia here. The cost of internet is $5 for 1 gigabyte of data. And it's $5. It's what feeds some family in rural area and stuff like that. So majority of Africans are still living below $1 a day. So, and we are talking of the average of internet in Africa. It's roughly over $2. You know, places that are very good, Nigeria and some other places, you're talking of $2, 50 cents or 70 cents, like in Senegal and stuff like that. It's still high. It's still high. So
yes,
people will force feed before they are thinking of getting credit.
Yes,
online.
I do agree. I do agree with you on that issue, of course, and I think it's something that we need to all work towards. And it's a key. It's very key, because if we need to have, people need to have access. And the key thing is infrastructure is growing. Yes, there's connectivity, a lot more connectivity, but certainly the issue, of course, is important. Do we have Eric back online? Eric, do we have Eric online?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry
All
for
right.
the...
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. All right. So, okay, over to you again once more. Thanks.
Yeah, so let me quickly get back into my presentation. Okay, so my name is Eric from Ghana, and so I'll be sharing a few experiences on what Ghana is doing. And I will essentially be looking at a few of the pointers to the digital economy framework, and I want to just address a few of these things in line with some of these things. So I'll be looking at the telecom and internet infrastructure, where we are, where we're going. I'll look at the e-commerce applications and intermediaries, etc. And then I'll look at how participants have been equipped to transact within the digital economy, the legal and regulatory framework, and of course, I will touch on the taxation issue. Well, I think the general practice is to have a very robust telecom backbone for countries. I think for many years we've talked about the internet, the telecom backbone, on which the internet will normally ride on. And I think that's the primary thing. Many countries have done a lot of work in terms of putting fiber and other things on the ground. And of course, the internet transit, which rides on these infrastructures. Thankfully, we have all the international gateways that allow countries within the sub-region to have internet access. Of course, the question is whether these things are very adequate. Then, of course, the issue of access to the ordinary, what is the kind of quality that we have, and is it affordable? How stable? I just tried to get on board, and then my internet just went off. So these are some of the things that we need to look at. For Ghana, we have, I think, 4 main telcos, telecom operators. They have done extensive work in terms of putting fiber on the ground. And of course, the government has also done some fiber optics, especially in areas where the telcos are not able to put fiber because it doesn't make business sense for them. And of course, we have, I think, 5 international bandwidth transit providers, and they provide about 12.7 terabytes of data. So that kind of data, I think, is very adequate. The question has been more of the affordability. How affordable? Recently, we got some information that Ghana has the most affordable internet in the West Africa region. And essentially, I think that what the government did was to reduce some of the taxes that were on, especially the talk tax. And because of the COVID issues, there was a lot of outcry. And of course, it brought the internet, pricing down a bit. However, it's not as many will expect. There is still that agitation because everything that we do in the digital economy actually depends on the kind of internet access that we have. Now, Ghana's penetration is about 50%. And of course, for instance, the main telco has about 86 or almost 90% penetration based on their own areas that they find to be, business, to make business sense. However, there are areas that they cannot really access because they think that, well, it would not make business sense to recover whatever investments are made. So that is the challenge that we have there on the underserved and areas that are not served completely because of how dispersed, for instance, some of these settlements are. And of course, the government is using the Universal Service Fund, and it has launched what we call rural internet. There's been a number of locations that have been provided. However, the government effort is not enough. There are still areas that will not have this access for many months or years to come. And so the concept of community networks from tech and CSOs like Internet Society is becoming very handy. Of course, I know that Ghana Internet Society is currently working on some community networks to bring more people into the digital world. And of course, the issues there are mostly because these community networks are owned by the communities. There are issues of licensing. How do we provide licenses? Because these telco licenses are huge. And so there's this issue of, social licensing for some of these community networks. And of course, TV white space policy so that people can use this space to do. So these are things that are ongoing. The Communication Authority is been working on this space to ensure that people who can extend these networks can actually do that. And that's what I can say about the network infrastructure.
Okay, thank you very much.
In terms of deploying digital...
Eric, yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's just, I just want to perhaps give you a notice that we may need to give time to panelists. Obviously, we're running a bit out of time, but yes, if you can perhaps cover the main points so that we'll be able to give participants an opportunity to ask questions because we've only got not too much time. Thank you.
Okay, then let me just sum it in the next minute or so. A number of things have been done to ensure that people can get onto this digital world. And one of the things that the government has done is the mobile money interoperability. What that one has brought in is suddenly to bring the unbanked to 96% because a lot of people have access and you can have interoperability between your accounts and other things, and it's brought a lot of people there. The other thing that I really want to also talk about is the digital identity system. The system, we didn't have a unique identity system, but thankfully we have a biometric identity system now, and the government is using this system to do a lot of things. One of the things that the government has done with this is to incorporate it as the tax identification number. Now, before that, the number of taxable people were just about 4% of the population. But once this was completed, that number has jumped to about 40-something%. And we're talking about just 50% of citizens having this new identity. And that is something that, of course, for government should be very good for them. Of course, let me just end by just talking briefly about, of course, in Ghana, we don't have a digital transformation strategy, but currently there is a project to review all the policies and then come out with that policy. And let me just end here. When we're having the discussions, if there are any questions, I think I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. That was also a good one from Ghana. So the Jollof War continues. Now over to all the participants. I know quite a few have been trying to send in questions, but if there's anyone there that has any questions, if you can raise your hand, perhaps we'll then be able to give you an opportunity to ask the panelists questions based on their presentations or the subject matter. You can put your questions on the chat if you want to do it privately, or you can raise your hand digitally for us to then give you a chance to ask a question.
Hello, may I ask my question, please?
Yes, please go ahead. Your name, please, and where you're calling from.
Okay, Enoch Dut from Ghana. I'm a member of the Ghana ISO Ghana chapter. I'm very glad to see the interactions that we are having surrounding the digital economy. My question is about the potential of redundancy in our exploitation of the digital resources we have. I think Africa have had a history of allowing our resources to be redundant, taking a take from the fact that we have about a third of the world's natural resources and we are yet the least developed. Yes. So I want to ask, is this a major threat, and how are we strategizing to combat that? For instance, you have Ghana, we have done a lot in terms of digitization. A number of our digital platforms that the government has put up, you see that the utilization is very low. An example of our digital address system, the government invested hugely to ensure that every inch of the country is digitally assigned an address. But this system has been barely used for any serious activity.
Okay, those are two important areas. I get what you're trying to get at there. If we can quickly capture that, you're looking at the issue of redundancy. Certainly, if we want this economy to grow, this digital economy to grow, redundancy is important. Can anyone, Martha, anyone of the panelists want to perhaps give an answer to that, the issue of redundancy? Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't quite get the full question, but is he talking about redundancy of bandwidth?
Yes, infrastructural redundancy, yes, because for some countries, I think, rely on just one cable network. And so far, the West African one, which will have created the terrestrial, is still ongoing. So that's a question I think he's putting forward. How are we preparing for redundancy, or what redundancy do we have?
I think someone else can take that.
Okay. Yes, Poncelet, or I think you have, or Madam Fatou, any notes on that in terms of redundancy? How is Senegal creating redundancy so that we're not just reliant on one mode in terms of our connectivity and in other areas?
Merci pour la question. Merci Salieu. Au niveau du Sénégal, donc, comme vous le savez, le Sénégal, vu sa position,
Senegal, which is supplied by moving satellites. In order to solve the problem, we said that we have fiber of 13,000 or so kilometers. The Senegal state has already put in place 5,000 with the agency, the IT agency of the state. So in conjunction with the state IT agency, we're trying to make sure that we do not have to depend so much on our operator. So it is a good policy that we need to put in place in order to avoid this kind of dependency. So redundancy needs to take into account and respecting the fact that telecommunication is a sector that is more or less where there's more or less a monopoly, which has been, so we need to work towards delocalization. But the agency RTP works with the ministry to work on redundancy because we do need it in order to have a better digital sovereignty. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. We have a question on the chat from Biliaminu Ibrahim asking about that Nigeria has launched the National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy, and how is WIGF partnering with the government to see that these pillars are implemented. Madam Mary, if you're aware of that, is there any way that perhaps collectively West Africa will be able to harness some of these individual policies from various governments? Madam Mary? Mary, we can't hear you. Okay, Martha from Nigeria also, you're aware of this digital economy policy. How do you see that being replicated in other West African countries?
Yes, that's in one of my recommendations. I clearly stated that there are actually some great things that some countries are doing, like Nigeria. I know the NCC has some models that other countries can copy from. And also the ministry has some wonderful models. The minister is doing some great work in terms of the digital economy and access and affordability. And also we had our speaker from Senegal and other countries. So that's why in one of my recommendations, I suggested that together with the IGF, multi-stakeholder collaboration, so that there can be synergies on what works and what doesn't work. And then each country, maybe in West Africa, can now, adopt those things that work and change the way they are doing the things that do not work. So it's possible to synergize and really make things work collectively as a region. So that was one of my recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Alice Lawrence. Cyber attacks is said to have risen by 600%. The question is, will illiteracy alone be sufficient without some form of laws or regulations? Anyone want to answer that in terms of cybersecurity awareness? Is awareness enough, or do we have to then have cybersecurity policies? Because in Sierra Leone, we've just enacted the cybersecurity and crime law, or I should say act. Is there any such thing going on in terms of the legal framework around cybersecurity? Any one of the panelists?
Okay. Okay, for Nigeria, there is a legal framework that the NCC has in place for cybersecurity and privacy. And even the digital economy has a robust framework. So it's, I think what we are now pressing is for more awareness amongst the people to know what is on ground. So that is where more sensitization is for the people to know. So yes, there are legal frameworks in Nigeria.
Yeah, Chair, can I speak for Ghana?
Oui, pour le Sénégal aussi.
The same is the case in Senegal. There's a legal framework. We have, in 2008, we had a cyber crime law that we're trying to update, that moved towards cyber security law. It was one of the recommendations from the National Strategy for Cybersecurity. There's a part on raising awareness, but we do need there's an importance in having a legal framework, and a lot of these laws have been updated in this direction. And we also have a law.
En place, vous savez, au Sénégal, il existe aussi l'école régionale nationale de cybersécurité à vocation régionale qui forme sur les risques et les potentialités. Et nous avons une brigade au niveau de la police qui s'occupe de la cyber.
There's also the police that takes care of cybercrime, and there's also other agencies. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again to our fabulous panelists for the excellent presentations. We have seen and heard on the presentations that there is a lot of potential. There's work that has been done that can be replicated right across West Africa and beyond. So I think our takeaway from this is that West Africa is prepared, but we need more collaboration, and to enhance that, we're doing a lot more. And once again, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank all the participants, well over 100, which is quite good. And we hope that we'll continue this dialogue as we move along. So over to you, Madam Mary, and thank you once again to everyone who has participated at this, as our time is now up. And thank you very much. Thank you.